listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Getting on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of West Coast Bias, presented by Baseball Isn't Boring. I'm joined this week by a good friend, one of the best baseball content creators out there, who recently just got a show with Foul Territory. It's called Monster Territory, presented by Foul Territory. YouTuber, check out the Twitters, all that stuff. He's not only just going to talk about baseball, but he'll talk about other stuff, but he's a real one. The legend himself, Robbie Hyde. Robbie, how you living, my guy?
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm at legend status yet. I got a long way to go, but I appreciate that. How you doing, my friend? Thanks for having me on.
We're doing well. We're dwindling down, counting the days to spring training, which is crazy. And I know this show's a West Coast centric show. The reason I wanted to have you on is you kind of have your pulse on everything, not just the Red Sox, not just the East Coast, if you will, and that's why it's fitting that we're talking here. So I wanted to ask you, free agency is still not done. We saw Pete Alonso sign yesterday with the Mets. That reunion happened as we all kind of expected, maybe. Bregman is still out there. What's going on? What's going on with Alex Bregman? I see you tweeting about him quite a bit, and I know you're willing that into existence. I know the Nolan thing, you're trying to will that into existence too. But where exactly are we with Bregman?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know what the heck is going on with Alex Bregman. It's funny because I think back to before the offseason, maybe a month before, and I was thinking, all right, actually, you know what? I'll take that a step further. I was even thinking last offseason when you had the Boris 4 that were still sitting there on the market in spring training, and I'm thinking, man, who are some guys that could be on the market late next year? And I saw Bregman, and I'm like, you know what? His numbers were still good this past year. He was still a 4 wins above replacement player. But when you took a look at the slash line, there was some regression there. So I kind of thought at the time, I wonder if Bregman's a guy that could end up sitting on the market for a little while. And here we are. And, really, I think it's just a matter of what do teams see his value as compared to what the Boris Corporation thinks. And it sounds like teams are just very far apart at this point. I think they see the metrics. If you go on StatCast, they're pretty middle of the road when it comes to the batted ball profile. And you got a guy in his 30s. Historically, those contracts don't age very well. So I think teams really today are just being a bit more hesitant, especially on the guys in their 30s. The metrics are regressing a little bit. So I think teams are a little hesitant to give him that long-term deal. Now, reportedly, there are a couple of 6-year offers out there. One is reported to be the Astros. I personally think the other one is the Blue Jays. You saw Hector Gomez put something out there today that it is the Blue Jays. Wouldn't be surprised if that's who it is. But, everyone else, they're wanting to go to the short-term route. And I think it's really just a matter of finding that happy medium. I don't think he's going to get the long-term deal, big bucks contract that he's looking for. But I think he's also thinking, all right, I don't want to just do, a 3-year deal. I'd like to, at least have something in the middle, maybe in that 4 or 5 year range, get a decent AAV. And I would imagine there could be some opt-outs in there. It's just a matter of, who's going to be that team that's going to step up just enough to make him happy. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up, taking a multi opt-out kind of a deal. We've seen the Cubs as of late. When looking at the reports, there could be a 4-year offer on the table from them. The report is north of $100 million. We don't know what the exact number is, but sounds like it's a pretty competitive offer. Who knows where my Red Sox are at? I think he would be great there. I think not just on the field, but in the clubhouse as well. We'll see. The Tigers they've been reported, all off season to be connected with him. Could he just go back to the Astros? Jose Altuve is reportedly willing to move out to left field to make it work. Do the Astros want to do that? They've said the door is cracked open. But there's other reports. Dana Brown is saying, "Oh no, I forget the wording exactly, but saying talking about him in past tense." And so I'm not sure, what's going on. It just feels like they're waiting this out as long as possible. Just like any good agent does, right? But let's see what ends up happening there.
No, and it's all interesting because I think you're right. I have a theory as well that I agree with you. I think it's the Astros and the Blue Jays that have that kind of, quote unquote, longer term offer. And then there's a handful of like these shorter term offers, if you will, that are probably between that 75 and $100 million range, right? Great position to be in if you really, listen, I would sign for 3 years, 75 right now if I could, but but it's one of those where it's the fit. And I'm convinced that he wants to be a Red Sox. And I'm just saying that based off of just kind of things that he's posted, if you will, and whatnot. And so I don't know how much of a bargaining chip that's going to drive the point home with that ownership group. But that marriage makes too much sense, right? Yeah. It's interesting that the Tigers, I think, would be a good fit too. That's a team that they got some pieces right now where they can kind of bang with some of those dogs in the AL as a whole. Mm-hmm. So that would be an interesting marriage. Obviously, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Go back to the Astros, especially if Altuve really is willing to move. But it's one of those too where I don't necessarily think it's going to be like a fumbling of the bag, if you will, like Pete Alonso did with the Mets. That's a case that's going to be studied for years to come. But it's all. Again, I am surprised actually that he is the guy that is kind of the last quote unquote marquee guy that is signing. I actually thought it would have been a Jack Flaherty. Obviously he just signed, but I would have thought it would have been the pitching situation just because that market was going to take a minute to sort itself out as it always does. Yeah. And I am surprised that Justin Verlander signed a deal before Alex Bregman, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah. I can't believe that either. It's been a strange offseason. I think for the most part, looking back on off seasons, this has been a pretty fun one, but it's also been a little strange at the same time. I want to touch on one more thing there with Bregman and the Red Sox. I agree with you. I think and I'm really not even trying to be biased. I'm looking at it from a baseball point of view. Alex Bregman has torched Fenway Park. The numbers there are insane. The OPS through the roof. The way his swing profile's there, you got the green monster. The guy can just play wall ball all day. He would, in my opinion, be a 40 double guy, 25 homers. He'd be so perfect. The problem, which I personally don't think it would end up being a problem, but I could see where, people get a little concerned about, where you have all these young middle infielders coming up through the system, right? Christian Campbell is the hot name right now, along with Roman Anthony in their system. You also got Marcelo Meyer. So, if you bring in Bregman, depending on how the deal works out, where the opt-outs are, that is something that could come into play. It's one of those, it's kind of like a good problem to have when you have that much talent if you bring Bregman in. But if you're looking at Campbell, the guy was just insane this past year. The numbers were through the roof in the minor leagues, and they see a lot in him, and they think he could be ready by opening day this year, depending on how he does in spring. So I understand the logistical part of that with Bregman and the fit there, but to me, I think the Red Sox, I don't know why they're not budging a little further. I will say a part of me thinks maybe they're not taking that extra step because I think maybe they're hoping that Vlad ends up not going back to Toronto or signing the long-term extension. And maybe they want to take a crack at him for next offseason. That's kind of my thinking. Maybe they don't want to get into a big commitment because they see down the road. But at the same time, though, you got to focus on the present, right? And so, if it's not Bregman, Arenado, that could be a pretty decent fit too, to where you put him at third, move Raffy, DH, first base, however they do it. There's a lot of interesting things going on in Boston right now. So,
wanted to ask you, to your point, it's been a super interesting offseason. Obviously, the talk of the offseason has been the Dodgers are just crushing everybody. The Mets are doing kind of what they're doing. The Blue Jays have been in on the last couple off seasons. They've been on a lot of guys, much to a lot of people's surprise. For you, kind of as we look down, kind of all the transactions that have happened in the offseason, what's the big one that you're just like, okay, this is the big transaction of the offseason? And then which one that's kind of under the radar for you?
I mean, it's probably I'm probably taking the easy way out here, but it's got to be Soto. I mean, he's a generational talent, in my opinion. I think he's a future Hall of Famer. The fact that the Mets, they did what it took to get it done. I think it was more than just a baseball move. I think it was just a changing of the culture in a way for the Mets. You know, they're taking that step forward, not just on the field, but as an organization in New York. You know, just saying we're here. You know, we just made it to the National League Championship Series this past year. We had all this good energy last year. Let's go capitalize and let's go land the big guy that they've been looking for a long time. Right? Lindor, obviously, very good. You know, if Ohtani didn't exist, then he would have won the MVP last year. But you know, getting Soto, man, that was so big in just so many ways. And if I'm looking at underrated, you know, you just mentioned it a little bit earlier. You know, the Flaherty one, I really like that. I love that for the Tigers, right? And I look at it from the aspect, too, where they traded him to the Dodgers. You know, you give up Tyron Lorenzo, Trey Sweeney, or you got those guys back in return. And now you got Flaherty back. You know, like, I love that. You know, it's like, it's kind of sort of like they almost got him for free. You know, or these prospects for free, right? They had to give him up for a couple of months. He could have helped him out of the postseason, but at the time, no one thought that was going to, you know, they were selling. And they just went on this great run in the second half. And, you know, I just love that. I hope he stays healthy, and you got a great 1-2 punch there. All the young talent with Detroit taking a step forward this coming year. I just really liked that move. You know, if you take a look at, you know, some other ones out there, you know, I'm looking at it. Actually, it just happened a little bit ago. This is more of a wishful thinking, but I kind of almost sort of hope Yoan Moncada can find his way with the Angels. I don't know how that's going to work out because you got Rendon. But listen, Yoan Moncada, there's a little bias there. He was, you know, former top prospect with the Red Sox a little while back. But this is a guy, I was a big Yoan Moncada guy. I hope he can find his way with the Angels. I think the Angels are very interesting. You know, what happens with Rendon there. I think Moncada is a guy, you know, he's a guy where I still think there's a lot of talent there. And if he can get a chance and maybe he can get his career back on track. But I'd say for me, the underrated one, I like the Flaherty one, honestly.
No, and the Jack Flaherty back to Detroit, to your point, is super interesting because they got dudes. They got two horses now, right? Really, they have three if you really think about it. But you have a guy now that comes back with championship experience. You have a guy that has postseason experience, which, as you and I both know, those are two definitely different things, right? You know, pitching in the NLCS and pitching in the World Series, two different things. No disrespect to anyone that's pitched in the postseason, but that's just kind of, as they say in combat sports, right? The championship rounds. You know, that's kind of where you build that value. I'm still, you know, for me, I think the big one, obviously, as I kind of look at it, I agree with you on the Soto one. But for me, the reason it's surprising, I'm just shocked that the Yankees didn't re-sign him, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah, I thought he was going to go back. But then again, I was kind of thinking the longer it dragged out, which I knew it would, but I started just getting this feeling like, man, you know, he might not go back. I was thinking, how does he not go back? Right. I mean, you got the pinstripes, you got Judge, you just made it to a World Series, but you know, in the end, I think there was just more good energy coming from the Mets. So
no, and I agree with you that the Mets have been trying for the last few years to just get that marquee guy, right? Obviously they shopped on Ohtani, you know, they've checked in on everybody, and for them to finally get a guy and just say, hey, we're here, especially of Soto's caliber, like you said, a generational talent. You know, a lot of people are saying he overpaid, and it's like, well, it's just one of those that there isn't a comp for that. I mean, really, if you really sit back and kind of look at it at a granular level, really the comp that you can look at that makes sense to compare him to, and even then, I don't think it's a fair comp, is Bryce Harper. And and that there's still like levels to it, right? And you can make an argument that the Phillies probably underpaid for Bryce Harper. And so there's different things like that where it's tough to look at it. But you know what? The Mets have had a great offseason as well. You can't sit here and say that they didn't try to go out and Steve Cohen's trying, right? He's going out there and trying to kind of do what Oregon does in college athletics, where they're trying to get that chip one way or the other, and they're going for it. I wanted to ask you, getting off baseball for a second. You're a big WWE guy. I'm a big fan of wrestling as well. For those wrestling fans, for those of you that are unfamiliar, when I was on Bleed Lows podcast, we talked about that stuff. Robbie, if you follow Robbie, he'll chime in on the WWE stuff. How shocked were you that main event Jey Uso won the Rumble?
In a way, like, so as that Rumble was dragging on, I was thinking it was going to be Cena, right?
I think everybody did, honestly.
Yeah. The way it was unfolding, I was thinking it was going to be Cena. But then when it was Jey Uso and Cena at the end, I was like, are they gonna do something here? Like, as I'm thinking, it at the end of the day, it is Cena, right? He doesn't necessarily need to win the Rumble. It would have been a nice want, right? Because obviously, the amazing career that he's had in the WWE. But if there's anyone that's in a position to put over someone, it was that moment, and you think back, your heart was wanting Cena to win, but you also have to remember, and in a way, it's interesting, right? Because as long as I've been a baseball fan, the longer I go on with this stuff, I always try to think of how front offices think, right? They're looking at terms of value, right? They're looking at analytics, they're looking at all these different metrics. The WWE is very similar, right? They're looking at TV ratings. They're looking at merchandise sale. They're looking at just pop in the crowd. There's so many things that, in a way, like the decision-making with the WWE, in a way, almost not fully matches what these front offices in Major League Baseball do, but that's how they operate. Right? It's a business at the end of the day. And that's where you look back in hindsight, and it makes a lot of sense why they did that, right? This is a guy that's been getting a lot of good crowd reaction for what, a year or a couple of years now. And, the merch is through the roof. People love him, and if there was ever a great moment to put over someone that's on the rise, it was that moment, right? But I think Cena, he'll find a way to get that 17th championship eventually. So
I have a hot take that's probably unpopular. I think this is the Elimination Chamber situation is going to be a heel turn for Cena, and then he's going to go baby for WrestleMania, because there's always been that rumbling of him turning, right? And why not, with how he did his post Rumble presser and all that stuff, why not have a little bit of a heel run, if you will? Because I figured, honestly, that something was going to happen in the Rumble the second that a lot of people were talking about CM Punk doing favors. And I know, if you're not familiar with the wrestling lingo, doing favors is essentially the company comes to you and says, hey, we need you to put so-and-so over, because they're gravitating towards the fans, so on and so forth. That's essentially what happened with Jimmy Uso. And by the way, I don't think it's a bad move to put Jimmy over, because Jimmy's over. Like, Jimmy is so over. I went to SmackDown not too long ago here in Salt Lake City. That dude is so over that I was surprised that they weren't doing something kind of bigger with him, if you will, on the programming side. But that's kind of my hot take on Cena, that I think it's going to be like a little bit of a heel program in this chamber, and then going into Mania, it's going to be baby, and I think he ends up probably in some capacity, involved in the main event, but that's yet to be seen. But am I crazy to think something like that?
No, it's always something that, the whole heel turn thing, or he's even joked about it like on a show, and it's always been whispered, right? I mean, they even showed the what was it, the Bray Wyatt Cena match at the warehouse WrestleMania, the COVID WrestleMania, right? They even did the NWO thing, where it's like he's giving you a taste of it, not like a full meal, but he's giving you glimpses. I wonder if maybe they work it into this, final run. I don't think it would be a long-term thing. Like, if anything, it would just be like maybe work it into a program. Because they got to maximize this final run as best as possible, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some kind of a heel turn at some point. I don't think it would last very long though. So
No. I agree with that. Before we move back to the baseball, anything else that has surprised you in the Rumble that you just didn't see coming?
The one moment it has been talked about was the Drew McIntyre elimination.
Yeah.
That one was weird. You could tell there was something that happened with the elimination itself. There was a timing issue or whatever it was where, LA Knight, Logan Paul, they were kind of doing a little thing right there. And there seemed to just be a mix up in the timing. And I don't know what happened, if maybe one of the camera guys maybe they went a little too early, like yelling instructions or whatever. That's another thing too, that I've been listening to different wrestling podcasts of all these former wrestlers now are doing podcasts. I love listening to those guys because they tell you these little things that you have no idea about that are going on. And there was one guy, I think Stevie Richards, and he was saying that, the camera guys are always, shouting out stuff, help guiding the referees, also guiding them along. So that's where I wondered if there was something weird there, because the elimination of McIntyre felt very awkward and it felt rushed because this guy was having just such a big presence in that match. And he was everywhere, right? The camera was so focused on him all the time. And all of a sudden he just got eliminated. And it was like, what? Usually when those guys, you go back to when Brock Lesnar got eliminated from McIntyre back in that Rumble. They made it like a big spot. So I was kind of like, whoa, like what just that was kind of the one that, if I'm thinking of a moment that got my attention, that surprised me, it was that. So
no, and apparently he took to Twitter after and essentially just laid into we don't know who, right? But he laid into someone that had to get their
yeah, I guess
in.
it was LA Knight.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's the implication to me was either LA Knight or Logan Paul. Those are one of the two that
I'd like to say it was both, honestly. I would like to think like he's probably frustrated. I don't usually the answer, people are always, anytime people debate something like, oh no, he was mad at this guy, he was mad at that guy. No, it was probably just, I would imagine he probably got frustrated at the situation.
Yeah,
that's what I think at the end of the day. I don't think he was mad at like one person, probably just the whole thing got messed up and he's probably, who knows what happened. That's my guess.
However, I am of the opinion that I think him and Damian Priest should do a program together. I think that would be solid, not just from the program itself, but the in-ring action, the talking, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just throwing that out there, WWE. If you're listening, Paul Levesque, Triple H.
I love Drew McIntyre. He's so funny on social media. Like,
yeah,
I love the heel antics. I love the what do you call it? It's like he breaks down the fourth wall. I always love him. Like he's hilarious to me. Like, I don't know. I like that cynical kind of humor, and I enjoy Drew McIntyre a lot. I hope he gets a good run after WrestleMania.
Yes. Moving back to baseball, I've asked this to a few friends that are in the game currently and that are just fans. What's up with the Blue Jays? Like the Blue Jays, for whatever reason, just cannot close the deal with kind of anybody. And the last time that I talked about the Blue Jays with someone, they hadn't talked to Vladdy since December, apparently. Now they've engaged in conversations again. I don't know what that's going to look like. But I don't understand kind of they got Ohtani to come to them, right? They were able to get him in and chat with them. That in itself is a feat, right? They were in on Roki Sasaki. They've had conversations with Juan Soto. Apparently there was an offer reportedly for Pete Alonso. So they've been there. But what do you think it is that they just cannot close anything with any of these guys?
I think because the older I get over here, I mean, I'm not Gandalf the Grey by any means, but as a man now that pays rent and pays taxes and, all this stuff, I try to think, what is it about like Toronto that why these players seem to be a little hesitant on going there for? I just wonder if, the fact that it's a different country and they have obviously a a different tax system going on over there. They're going through some turnover, I believe, with government stuff. I'm not sure how much that really comes into play, but I think it's also when you factor in those things, or like the real life kind of stuff, and then you factor in just kind of the where this organization is. When you take a look at the farm system, they've taken a step back here over the last couple of years. I just think when you look at everything, I think the top players seem to be a bit hesitant on going there. Santander, that was a nice ad for them, right? Getting some power in that lineup. But, when you take a look at the metrics with Santander, like the expected WOBA, it's not great. It was pretty middle of the road last year. And I think there was a lot of teams out there that looked at Santander and thought, well, we don't know how this guy's going to be in a couple of years. They'll probably give them a good year or two. But I think a lot of teams thought, well, is it really worth investing, 5 years into this guy? So that's where I feel like the Blue Jays, that was an opportunity for them to capitalize on that. Max Scherzer towards the end of his career, they were willing to, give him a decent amount of money. You bring in Jeff Hoffman. That was another one that was weird because Hoffman, one of the top relievers on the market, I guess according to the reports, he had some questionable medicals when it came to the Braves and the Orioles, and he kind of just fell into the Blue Jays' lap at that point. So it's been even though they haven't landed the big fish and they haven't been able to get the extension done for Vlad, they have been able to make some moves. But I just wonder, is there a bit of fool's gold in these moves that they've had? And I wonder how much better they're going to get this coming year. I could see them being better this year. I think Bo Bichette is going to have a better year. I think Vlad's going to be Vlad, especially if he's going into a contract year, for crying out loud. I just wonder about the Blue Jays. I think they'll be better, but I just wonder how much better at the end of the day.
No, and fair, very fair. I mean, I think the adult thing, as I jokingly refer to it as, is the life thing. That definitely plays a factor in anything you want to do, right? I mean, it's where you want to be. Vladdy wants to be there. So that's why I'm just surprised they haven't offered him 50% of what they offered Juan Soto. I mean, for me, that's just kind of the surprising thing with that, because that dude's the face of your franchise. I mean, no matter how you kind of look at it, that's the face right now, right? And that's not a bad dude to have as the face of your franchise either, because if he makes it out to the open market, there's going to be a lot of suitors. It isn't just going to be the Red Sox. It'll probably be the Yankees. But I mean, who knows? Steve Cohen's ballsy. It could be the Mets too, right? So I mean, there's a lot of potential big time suitors that have bigger bank accounts than those guys do. So that's why I'm just surprised why they haven't gone out that far. But again, to your point, they're going to be better. I mean, they're absolutely going to be better. But also to your point, I don't think they're going to run the AL, right? They're not even in the AL East. That they're probably at best fourth best team in that division, maybe. But and keeping it in the AL East, I'm gonna word this in the most diplomatic way that I can, right? Masataka Yoshida, I see, just gets roasted all the time, right? And I know why, right? It more or less what it comes down to is he hasn't lived up to the scrutiny of the deal that he got. Am I wrong in looking at it in that assessment?
No, you're not wrong at all. Yoshida, here's the thing with Yoshida. I like Yoshida. He's a good hitter, right? He's a tough at bat. He's disciplined at the plate. He makes good contact. He's a pretty solid hitter for the most part. The problem with Yoshida is just his fit on the roster. He's not great defensively. He didn't even play defense at all last year. Ended up being, we found out later on, it was his shoulder that he ended up needing to get surgery on this offseason. So they were protecting him in that way. And then, but when you take a look, he's really just a light DH at this point. If he was a better defensive outfielder, I think we'd be having a completely different conversation. But, with Fenway Park, it's, when you're a lefty bat at Fenway Park, you need to have, at least in my opinion, you got to have at least 60 power on the grade or for the scouting report. Yoshida, he's got a little pop. He's got a little bit of that. He kind of reminds me of 2018 Andrew Benintendi, the bat. He's got a little something there, but a guy where, there was a lot of balls off of Benintendi's bat. They were warning track power. It's very Yoshida-like. And it's not a great fit. If he was a right-handed bat, we've been having, again, a completely different conversation. It's just not a great fit. I think he needs to go to a ballpark that suits him a little bit better. I think it's also, there's just too many guys that fit the roster better right now for the Red Sox than Yoshida does. So, and on top of that, it's the money that he's getting paid. And that's where, people have been talking about, oh, let's trade Yoshida. If they bring in Arenado, right? Okay, fine. You're right. Move Rafi to DH. Well, what do you do with Yoshida at that point? Because I don't know. Is there a team out there that's willing to take him? Sure. The Padres maybe could be a fit, but what's going on with their payroll? They've been a little tight over the last couple of years. I know I think they just figured something out with ownership. Who knows? Maybe they'll be okay with adding a little bit of money here. They could use another bat to replace Jerickson Profar. So maybe that could be an option. Maybe the Giants, Houston, they could use another, if they feel like he could play some outfield there in front of the Crawford boxes, maybe Houston. I think for the most part, Red Sox fans, they like Yoshida. It's just not a great fit overall for the roster.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I look at it, and like you said, he's not trash, right? Like, we're not going to sit here and say he's not a Major League Baseball. He's absolutely a Major League Baseball player, but I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's a fit thing. It's not, again, to your point, if he was a right-handed hitter, completely different conversation in that ballpark. And that's just kind of where it's at. But speaking along those lines too, trade-wise, I mean, I understand, and truthfully, it sounds like Nolan and the Cardinals just need to have a divorce. Whatever that ends up being, it sounds like that relationship is on the rocks, and they just need to kind of move on from each other. And, I don't know kind of where that's at. I'm not going to sit here and pretend, even with the reporting, that any of it makes sense. But as we kind of look back on where we're at now, there was a big trade in North American sports that just happened. The Lakers got Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks for Anthony Davis. I am a Lakers apologist as well. I will be honest with you. I was shocked that deal happened. And then the more and more that we learn about kind of the behind the scenes of what's happened with that, the Jazz didn't know what was being facilitated. Nico had only talked to Pelinka about it, so on and so forth. And it's the fascinating behind the scenes stuff. The Red Sox have been a part of some big deals. There's been some big deals in baseball, some blockbusters. I don't need to remind you about Mookie Betts, but thank you for the 2 championships.
You're welcome. Still crying myself to sleep.
I wanted to ask you, for you in North American sports, like trades like that, where do you kind of put that trade? Even because, again, the Red Sox have been a part of big deals. Where do you put that particular deal? And kind of when you look in the grand landscape of North American sports deals over the last, I don't know, we'll call it, let's say the last 50 years.
I mean, off the top of my head, I would imagine that's got to at least be top 5. Again, I'd have to go back and look at trades, but, the difference with that one was it wasn't just the star power that was in that trade. It was just, it completely happened out of nowhere. When I remember, so I'm going blank on the guy. He's basically the Jeff Passan of basketball. I'm going blank.
Shams Charania.
Yes. I'm not a huge basketball advocate. I'm not a huge fan. I mean, but when I saw that, the first comments that I was seeing was, "Did this guy get hacked?" And I'm like, I don't know. I was like thinking, has he gotten hacked before? I don't know. But then he posted something again saying this is real. And I was like, holy crap. And that's with me. Like, I'm kind of on the surface when it comes to being a fan of basketball. Of course I follow my Celtics. I was very happy they won this past year. I was more into basketball back in the original Big Three time with Garnett, Pierce, and Allen. But now I'm just so much into baseball. Anyway, but the star power combined with just how out of nowhere that was, I think you would have to put that in the top 3. I would imagine in all of sports. The one trade that I actually think about, because I was thinking, like, what trades in baseball have happened where similar? You had star power, but it was just completely out of nowhere. I actually think back to probably the Prince Fielder trade. I remember when that one happened. And I was like, wow, like what the? Like I didn't even expect that coming. Right? It was Fielder for Ian Kinsler. That one just completely like took me off guard. Right? It's not the same star power as Luka Doncic, but I'm just thinking if there's a trade where it took you by surprise, that I'd say that one is one that comes to my mind, because when you think back to all the baseball trades, all the big ones that have happened, you knew it was kind of coming, right? Like you'd hear all these rumors, reports, like Mookie, Soto, a couple of times, like you knew it was going to happen. Even A-Rod, go back to that one when we're going from the Rangers to the Yankees. He was a Red Sox at one point. But you just heard so much of those rumors, and this one was just so out of nowhere. Crazy.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. And like one of the trades I thought of kind of when that happened too was, and everyone kind of knew it was coming because it was around the deadline, right? Is when the Indians, then the Cleveland Indians, traded CC to the Brewers.
Yeah.
Because CC's a dude, right? And just also kind of what they got back. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Michael Brantley, a player to be named later, and a couple prospects. And because again, as a Lakers apologist, I've been saying this too. The Memphis Grizzlies are still waiting on whatever they got for Pau Gasol. Like they got Kwame Brown, and that's it, right? And Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic, straight up. Listen, no disrespect to Anthony Davis, he's a top 75 player ever. It's not even close. There's no parity there, right? There's, even the A-Rod thing that played out pretty hard too, and if you've watched, I'm blanking the name of the documentary that's on Netflix right now. The one where they cover the 04 team. Yep. They show kind of Nomar's position on that. And even Millar talks about that and how essentially you're trading a dude that doesn't want to be traded anyway, but you can argue is more or less kind of looked at as like the face of your franchise, right? And they trade him to the Cubs, and there's still some bad blood there.
Yeah. That one is another one that I thought of too. Here's the thing with that one. That one was a shocker.
Yeah.
But you almost had this feeling that because Nomar with the Red Sox at that time, the relationship was growing a bit sour. They weren't coming to terms on a contract extension. There was the one where, he wanted to be on the bench, for one of those games at Yankee Stadium. That was the one where Derek Jeter just dove into the stands, that incredible play that he made. And Nomar's just sitting there on the bench. And, and Francona, he wanted him to play in that game, but Nomar was kind of, he was grumpy at the time. And he was just kind of like, nah, I don't got it for today. I don't think a lot of people saw a trade coming, but when you look back at it in hindsight, there were just tea leaves where, and obviously he was hurt that year. He wasn't playing a whole lot. So, yeah, I don't think anyone at the time expected Nomar to get moved. And then it was a shocker when it happened. But looking back in hindsight, that was, you could see why they did, right? This one, even with Luka, obviously people talk about the weight gain, all that, or I don't even know, maybe I'm missing some other details there, but that one, it's like, even then, I don't really see was there anything like out there where there was like even bad blood between the two teams or between Luka and the Mavericks or I don't know. I didn't hear anything like that.
No, there was literally apparently Nico Harrison, who's the GM for the Mavericks, and Rob Pelinka, who's the general manager for the Lakers, were the only two people that had this conversation. And apparently the way that it started, it's just like if you and I were to be riffing about, hey, what if the Red Sox traded Yoshida for, I don't know, Chris Taylor, right? And in some cases, you'd be like, no, that doesn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z. But apparently that's how the conversation started. And from there, it just kind of grew. They kept it close amongst each other because there's trust there. And here we are now that Luka's a Laker, Anthony Davis is a Maverick, and it's just one of the most talked about trades ever. I mean, granted, like I was thinking too, like the trades that stand out to me are like when the big unit got traded in '98, when Teixeira got traded to the Angels, like that was kind of one of those, the same year that CC got traded. When Yoenis Cespedes got traded to the Mets, like I remember that one was one of those like,
Yeah.
oh, like, or
The Red Sox too.
yeah.
I remember that one.
Manny when he got traded to LA, obviously there was some stuff there, but that means the summer, I think it's the summer of '08, if I'm not
Yeah, oh
mistaken,
wait. Yep.
was a hell of a summer, right? But I think when you look at it, there's always, at least with all these trades that we just talked about, there's some smoke, right? Like there's something going on in the rumor mill where, even the Nomar thing, like even back then there wasn't the internet like it is now, but there was still at least rumblings of certain things. But this Luca and AD trade out of nowhere. I mean, I was sitting on my couch watching. I had just finished watching a boxing card that was on pay-per-view, and then I got the notification, and I was like, "Am I being punked right now? Like, is this real?" And then a buddy of mine says, turn on ESPN, and I turn on ESPN, and sure enough, it's real. And then now there's all this kind of behind the scenes stuff, which, as a fan, obviously, I think even those of us that are fortunate enough to kind of work in the spaces that we work in, you get a little jaded by it, but as a fan, you still kind of enjoy a little bit of the drama, if you will, that kind of comes with it, right? The story, once it kind of gets put together. I, for one, am quite excited for the 30 for 30 on this one, whenever that is.
Yes.
I am still surprised. Well, I'm sure there will be once Mookie is done playing. I really hope there's a 30 for 30 on that, just because there was, that was multifaceted too, because of the COVID, worries. And that's a part of apparently a factor as to why he didn't resign and so on and so forth. But I really kind of want to know what happened with the Red Sox and Mookie, because that marriage made too much sense in the long haul for it not to have been still intact today.
Yeah, I think back, that trade of Mookie, obviously, looking back on it, it stunk. Like that was just like, oh, like really? We're getting rid of our star player here. When you look back over, John Henry's time as the owner of the Red Sox, I'm not defending the move by any means, but I understand what he was thinking at the time. The way John Henry has always operated as the owner of the Red Sox is he wants to have the farm intact. He wants to have the farm producing talent, so you can have those young, cost-controlled players that are producing at a young age for you, and they're cheap at the same time. That is usually when he gets aggressive when it comes to signing those deals. And, at that point, the Red Sox had no farm, right? Dave Dombrowski had completely just depleted it, right, to do everything he could to win the championship in 2018. We had one of our top prospects around that time was Darwinzon Hernandez. I don't even know. Do you even remember that name? He was a top 5 prospect for us.
Yeah, vaguely. I mean, because of that, like to your point, that farm was just not good.
Yeah. You had some guys, you had Tristan Casas, you had Jarren Duran. Duran was a lot farther away. Casas was a lot farther away, though, at the time. They had no major league ready talent coming out of the farm at that point. And again, could you make the argument Mookie Betts, just whatever, you sign him to a long-term deal. If they had signed him to a long-term deal, then he would be great for us right now. But they look at it in terms of the economics. They're looking at it in terms of the value. Like, is it worth paying Mookie at this point when we got no supporting cast? And then people will say, well, go out there and get free agents, where it's like, I get that too, but I'm looking at it from the way the front office thinks, and they don't want to go out there and just be spending money on contracts that are not going to have good value. That's why I think Vlad is a guy, if he hits free agency, that's a guy I could really see them going after, because he's under 30. They don't like giving John Henry doesn't like giving contracts to guys in their 30s unless they have that supporting cast that, even if their contract is, maybe, regressing, or their value is regressing, you still have these young guys that can produce, and they're cheap. So I just look at the whole thing was a value thing at the end of the day. It was the Dodgers were in a much better position at the time to trade for him and sign him to a long-term deal. It would have been nice to have Mookie, though, I will say. So.
No, and the part that always kind of gets forgotten is the Dodgers also acquired David Price. They ate about half of his deal.
Yeah.
So, it ended up being I mean, that for me, at least in the last, I don't know, 15, 10 years, that's probably the only deal that you could really put close to kind of in comparison. But also, you could also make an argument that that's what kind of started the run for the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers were already a stacked team, right? But then they went out and got the best guy available. It wasn't available, but the best guy in baseball that isn't Shohei Ohtani, if you will. And they were able to make him a centerpiece of the franchise. Sorry to dwell on that. I'm not trying to bring up old painful feelings, but it's
always
just
fun. I actually kind of enjoy talking about it because it's kind of the way my mind thinks. Because again, I try. My goal over on my channel is, my predictions are always terrible, all that stuff. But I try as much as I can to try to think like a front office. Like I try to match how they're trying to operate as much as possible. So like I always find that conversation intriguing because because when you look at the talent level of Mookie, obviously great player, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. It's interesting how front offices have come along over the last several years. So
no, absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask you for one of those quote unquote terrible predictions. So here, as the offseason ends, number one, where does Alex Bregman end up?
Oh man, like it feels like one day there's momentum building for one team, and then the next day it just dies, and then another team emerges. Right? One day it's the Tigers, one day it's a return to Houston, the Cubs over the last couple of days. The Red Sox at one point. I don't know, man. I just wonder if he ends up just going back to Houston. I just wonder if maybe they figure something out, like kind of just like what Alonso did with the Mets. You were starting to think, okay, could the Blue Jays actually be a destination? Could the Angels, right? They were popping up at one point. The Reds popped up at one point for Pete Alonso, for crying out loud. So I just wonder if he ends up just saying, you know what, can't find the deal I'm looking for. Sure, other teams are making offers, but why not just take the 2-3 year deal with the Astros with an opt out, try again later on. I will say though, I think the Cubs are interesting. They would have to figure out what to do with Nico Horner. I think Matt Shaw is a guy they love. They have very high hopes for. I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing in their infield opening day. I think the Cubs could be interesting. I will still leave out a sliver of possibility for the Red Sox. But then again, I just wonder, does he just go back to the comfort? If he's not fully finding that deal that he's looking for, he's been comfortable in Houston. It's also a tax-free state, so that's an advantage in itself. I just wonder if he ends up just going back there and then he tries again at some point, whether, maybe they come to an agreement on an extension or he just goes to the market, next off season. I will say the Red Sox, I'll get back to them again. The one interesting thing with the Red Sox, if he cares about trying to maximize his value, that's where and he wants to go back out into the market next offseason. That's where I wonder if the Red Sox or Astros end up being the destination, because those ballparks just fit him so well. And then at that point, it's just, who gives them the most AAV for 1 year? If that's something he's looking to do. I'll say Houston, honestly, at this point. It's just, I'm just going off the comfort, but it depends, how much are they willing to give? They tend not to go crazy for these guys that are going into their free agent years. So that's where I have pause there, if they would be willing to even, give him a higher AAV. But then again, it's 1 year. If he wants to do the opt out, I'll say Houston. I know I'm rambling there. I think a return, I'll go with that. If not, I'll probably say Chicago.
I do respect that you didn't go full homer and say, he's going to be a Red Sox. So I appreciate that, though. I have two more terrible quote unquote predictions from you before I set you loose. Number one, where do you see the Red Sox kind of finishing the season out, assuming everything kind of goes to plan? And then number two, who's winning the World Series this year?
I think for the Red Sox, I think right now I see an 85 win team. They brought in Crochet. That was I think I don't think people realize like how big of a move that was. You're bringing in a guy
incredibly underrated move, by the way. Incredibly underrated move.
Yeah, like that was one where it's just I think it's a much bigger deal than what people think. This is a guy who was a reliever, and he had Tommy John, and he went into the rotation for the first time, and he puts up almost a 5 wins above replacement on Fangraphs. The guy was a monster this year. He wore down a little bit in the second half, but what do you expect? I mean, this is a guy, he was a reliever his whole career, in the pros and coming off elbow surgery. So I think there's a big potential where he could be a Cy Young candidate. And I'm really not even saying that as, being a Red Sox fan. I'm just looking at it from a numbers point of view. He's a favorite of mine for the Cy Young, but what he brings to that top of the rotation, I think it's just a lot. And then you're bringing in a guy like Buehler who could tap into some potential there, or some upside there, coming back from his second Tommy John. He looked good in the postseason. So let's see if he can keep that momentum going. I think they need to do something with the lineup to give them some balance, whether that's Bregman or Arenado. I feel pretty good about one of them landing in Boston. I just feel like, Arenado, if they could have found a trade already, Houston didn't work out, but I feel like they could have already found something by now. And once Bregman comes off the board, if he goes elsewhere, I think there's a good shot Arenado ends up in Boston. Just makes a lot of sense because the Red Sox need to improve their defense at third base. No disrespect to Rafi, but they need his bat more right now. They need better defense at third base. And Arenado, when you look at it from a contract point of view, I think they just see, it's 3 years left. When he gets moved, his AAV will be reset to around like 17.5 million. So, and that's even without the Cardinals eating some cash or however that works with the deferred money. So I think they're going to get one of those guys. I think that's going to really balance out the lineup, which they need. I think either of those guys would hit well. I think Bregman would be better, but Arenado, I think, would be fine. I could see Arenado being that Mike Lowell kind of addition where he was terrible in 05 with the Marlins, but he came to Fenway, and then the ballpark fit him perfectly. So I could see a similar trajectory for Arenado at Fenway Park. So I think that would be huge for the lineup. You've brought in some bullpen additions, with Justin Wilson, Aroldis Chapman. I just see a much better team. And then you got all these young guys that are coming up. Christian Campbell could be someone that really brings an impact this year. Roman Anthony, the number one prospect, well, outside of Roki Sasaki. These guys are going to do big things. Story, I'm expecting a bounce back year out of him. Tristan Casas, hopefully he can stay healthy. I just see a lot of bounce back potential. I see a lot of youth potential. And I just think there's too much potential for this team to not be competitive, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense because, again, I'm of the opinion that when the Red Sox are good, it's better for baseball, right? Just like when the Mets and the Yankees are both good, that's great for baseball. And so that's why I think I agree with you. I think 85 wins, I think is a good kind of, I don't want to say expectation, but I think when you look at the team on paper and what the pieces are that are coming back and even the kind of stuff that's been floating out there, it makes all the sense in the world as to why they could be an 85 win team. I mean, they should be, because again, Garrett Crochet, I think that ballpark is actually going to be great for Garrett. And as a whole, really, the big thing is he's coming a year off of Tommy John, right? But that's kind of expected, like you said, with the velo. And most importantly, I think that's a great fit for Walker too, where he's not expected to be kind of what he was in LA, but he's getting a fresh start. And you and I both know when some guys move on and they get that fresh start, it ends up working out great for some of these guys. And I think that's perfect for Walker Buehler. So I have to ask him before go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, I agree. And also, with Andrew Bailey, pitching coach for the Red Sox, they're going to tinker a little bit, I think, with, the pitches that he's throwing. The four-seamer wasn't great for him this past year. I wonder if they kind of get him away from that, go more towards the cutter, go more with a bit of a two-seamer, go with the sinker. I think Buehler is going to have a much better time. And like you said, gets him away, because it's unfortunate for him because, Dodger fans obviously understood, he had two Tommy Johns, but they saw how good he was. And obviously the guy was one of the top pitchers in the game at one point. And once you see that, you have that expectation in your head. So I think it's going to be good for him to get that fresh start. So, but getting to your question about a World Series pick, I mean, I think everyone's going to be going this way, but I think if there is a team that has the best shot of repeating since those late 90s Yankees, I think it has to be the Dodgers at this point. There's just too much talent. You never know how things are going to play out in the postseason. Anything can happen. But I mean, they just have so much depth. I mean, Ohtani going back on the mound. I mean, will he get another 50-50 year? I don't know about that, especially going back to the mound. But I think the Dodgers, there's just too much going on there. Definitely a favorite. I actually like the Rangers a little bit. I think there's a bit of potential there with the Rangers to maybe make a bit of a run again. They got a lot of talent there. They got guys coming back from injury. They really bolstered up the bullpen this offseason. Brought in a guy like Jock Peterson. If you want to ask about underrated free agent additions, I think Jock Peterson was a decent one there. I like that. I like the Rangers a little bit in the American League. The Yankees are going to be there as well. Always looking at the D-backs. I think if the D-backs had gotten into the postseason this year, I think that team could have been a bit of a problem again. I think the postseason could have gone a lot different if they had gotten in, but because I love the pitching that they have. I love the bats they got in the lineup. There's a lot of different ways, man. Again, even if a team like the Mariners, if they can figure out their bats, figure out that lineup, right? And they made a manager change. They brought in Edgar Martinez to lead the hitting department there. If they could figure something out with the bats, they got all this pitching, maybe the Mariners could make a bit of a run too. Again, though, it's so hard to predict. I think you have to go Dodgers now, though. Right? I think you got to take that.
No, and I mean, on paper, listen, like you said, this is probably one of the deepest baseball teams we have ever seen. Like when you look just everywhere, there's just so much depth. And the wild part is they're still not done in the sense of there's going to be guys that are going to end up going on the 60-day IL, and they're going to have to add some other pieces there. And that's kind of insane when you really sit back and think about it, because again, to your point, talking about years on a contract, Tanner Scott wanted to be a Cub. And the only reason he wasn't a Cub is they weren't willing to go 4 years with him. So he took the Dodgers 4-year offer. Sometimes that's all it takes for a guy to sign a deal, right? They just signed Kirby Yates and they DFA'd Ryan Brazier. It's insane kind of the depth that they have. I mean, if you're DFAing a guy like Ryan Brazier, you have insane depth, right? I will say I was high on them last year, but injuries plagued them. The team that I think really could make a run against, I mean, obviously the Mets are the kind of fit in for that can give them a run in that league. The Braves, when they're healthy, that's one of the best teams in all of baseball. In the AL, I would hope that now that they've gotten a little bit of experience in the postseason, no disrespect to your Red Sox and no disrespect to the Yankees, whom you hate so much, but the Baltimore Orioles, I think, really could make a little bit of a run, especially with some of the things that they've done this offseason. The Arizona thing, I think, is interesting because I can't tell you anyone that had it on their bingo card that they were going to go out and spend what they spent on Corbin Burns, of all guys. And so they're clearly willing to do whatever they need to do to stay competitive in that division because, I mean, to your point, it's really hard to pick against the Dodgers. And I look at it as not only as a Dodgers apologist, but as a fan, kind of what's best for baseball. I wouldn't be mad if we got another Dodgers-Yankees World Series, but I also wouldn't be mad if we got a Dodgers-Orioles World Series, Dodgers-Astros World Series, just because the Astros can go to hell, so on and so forth, just because the story is what makes it, right?
Yeah, I love the stories, man. There's so I think kind of the feeling that I'm getting about this upcoming season is I feel like you're getting a lot more teams that are getting a bit more even when it comes to, especially the teams that are battling it out for the wild cards, a few divisions. It's getting a bit more even out there. I feel like we're in store for a pretty wacky season. I feel like you could see a lot of teams in the mix. I hate to bring up I know Dodger fans are going to hate this one, but even the Giants, I feel like could make a run, like a third wild card there. Bringing in a Willie Adames, I really like that move. I feel like there's so many ways this go. And also, I'll bring this up too. The Rays. The Rays had a lot of injuries this past year. I love the Ha-Seong Kim move. I thought that's getting back to another underrated move. I love that. All right, he's not going to be back for a couple of months, but I love Ha-Seong Kim. I think he's a very underrated player. Right, good defense, speed, gives you a good at bat. The Rays got all this talent coming up. Junior Caminero, McClanahan's coming back. I'm not saying they'll go on a World Series run, but I expect the Rays to be in the mix for a wild card. There's so many ways, right? And if the Cubs, if they bring in Bregman, I mean, there's another team in the National League that could cause some problems. So I'm excited for it. I think this is going to be a very interesting season.
No, I agree. I think it's going to be going to be a watched season. I think too, just because of we finally have a villain, if you will, in the sport.
Exactly, and that's what they need. That whether people like it or not, they need that. I'm interested to see the ratings for the Super Bowl because I'm seeing a lot of people tweeting like this is the one Super Bowl like I'm just not interested in. I'm curious to see the ratings there. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. My goodness, my brain is not working. But the Dodgers are absolutely a team that is kind of taking that role, and baseball does better when you have that.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, and not just, again, when you have that, it's been the Yankees for so long, right? They were the evil empire, but I feel like since kind of that era, the Jeter, Yankees to now, we really haven't had that. And now we have that. And I am here for it, not just as a Dodgers apologist, but just because it's going to get eyes on the game that we so badly need. And I'm quite excited for that. Robbie Hyde, who was my guest today. Robbie, where can the people find you?
Find me on YouTube. My potato face is right there with my my ginger beard. It sticks out like a sore thumb. You'll find me. Just type in my name, Robbie Hyde. Just talking baseball every day. Whatever comes up. Whether that's right now, we're still in the off season, so a lot of trade stuff right now. Still got some free agent stuff going on, but we're going to be getting into season previews here eventually. I'm getting excited for it. Another fun season coming up. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Also, any Red Sox fans out there, we're talking Red Sox baseball all this coming season with Monster Territory, with the Foul Territory Network now. And we're going to be doing post-game coverage every night. Very excited for it. It's going to be a busy year, but yeah, I'm easy to find. My ginger self, like I said, sticks out like a sore thumb. So.
He's a great follow on Twitter. It's Ginger Snap Hyde, Hyde. I follow him. You should too. And not only that, he's a very handsome potato, and you should follow him just solely on that. He's one of the best baseball creators out there as a whole, and we are very fortunate enough to have him on this episode of West Coast Bias. Most importantly, he also wore a baseball isn't boring shirt, and that's a real one right there, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And you too can find those if you just go to all the socials and whatnot. You can get one. But a big congratulations to you. I know I didn't make a big deal about it, but you joining the Foul Territory Network is rad just because it's going to get more eyes on that. And that's a great network. Shout out to the legend, AJ Pierzynski, who's on there. There's a lot of great people on that program, network as well. Please check them out. They're great ambassadors for the game, and they're all friends of our family as well.
Yeah, I will say when I first spoke to AJ Pierzynski, when we did the intro on their show one day, he asked me a question, and I just kind of froze. I was like, this is AJ Pierzynski asking me a question. I'm like, what is happening right now? I had this whole plan, like if I did speak to him, I didn't know if he was going to be asking me anything, but I was going to bring up like 2005 when he homered against the Red Sox in game 1 in the division round. I wanted to just tell him I freaking hated him for that still, but I just froze, it was just so crazy. They got a really cool thing going on over there. I'm excited to be a part of it. So, and
I'm sure AJ would also just laugh that of all the people that you were starstruck by, it was him.
It was just like, he was just, every morning I woke up, Sports Center, this guy somehow got in the highlights, whether or not he was, getting involved with, Michael Barrett on the Cubs or whatever it is, so yeah. Funny game.
No, they're great ambassadors to the game. Encourage you to follow them. As always, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of West Coast Bias presented by Baseball Isn't Boring. Shout out to Robbie Hyde. Please go follow him. Go watch his content. It's great. And Robbie, we got to do this again once the season starts. Hopefully by then we have an idea of kind of where our respective teams are at. And who knows, maybe they are trending to get that 85-win season and banging in there for a wild card.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime you want to talk some ball, just give me a call.